I'm sorry, bro. Here's your Laserdisc copy of Mission Impossible back.
Thank you, bro. But why did you steal it?
Well, it's just that Tom Cruise is the last American movie star, and I wanted to prepare for and celebrate the release of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning in the proper way.
Well, I sure can appreciate that. After all, why do you think we're here filming this ludicrous introduction to our retrospective for Mission Impossible?
Ah, I wonder why we suddenly had these microphones on.
Yeah, but how else are we going to pay homage to one of the greatest legacies in cinematic history?
You make a good point, bro. Could I come and watch the Laserdisc with you? No.
It's really good to have this back. Now, it was almost 30 years ago that the fuse was lit on a cinematic legacy that would last until today. Throughout 8 legendary movies, 5 incredible directors, scores of supporting ensemble, one man has been running through it all. Ethan Hunt's evolution from mild-mannered IMF agent to whatever you call somebody that does this has mirrored Tom Cruise's ascent to the very top of the movie world. And when we look back on where Mission Impossible started and compare that to where it is today, it's simply an extraordinary journey. So today, we are going to do just that, as we celebrate and review Mission Impossible and its legacy, culminating with the most recent entry in the series, The Final Reckoning. And don't worry folks, he's fine. It's just a water pistol. It began with Mission Impossible. Directed by the legendary Brian De Palma and loosely based off the TV show of the same name from the 60s and early 70s. It tells the tale of intercontinental espionage, betrayal, and doing whatever it takes to get the job done. It is still an extraordinary movie and a pure joy to experience to this very day. I do still recall going to see this at the cinema with my mother as a 5-year-old child. But what are you going to do? It was a PG. I'm pretty sure I slept through most of it, but that's no indictment of the film, as I clearly had no taste as a 5-year-old. And the story of Mission Impossible is classic. Agent is assigned mission, agent is double-crossed, agent goes rogue, agent is double-crossed again, triple-crossed. But that second double-cross leads him back to where he started, on the good side. It starts with the team having to lure a suspected double agent into stealing the knock list, which is a file containing the names and identities of covert operatives, and then follow the trail to their handler. But everything goes wrong, and Ethan's entire team is wiped out, or so it seems, and he's left as the prime suspect.
You're worried about me. Why?
From here, he goes rogue, promising to steal the real knock list in order to uncover who betrayed him. Classic spy stuff, double crosses, triple crosses, mask reveals. And along the way, we're treated to many iconic cinematic moments. This sequence with the massive fish tank exploding is still just so damned good. And we even get the first little hint, well, maybe not the first, but one of the earliest hints of that beautiful Tom Cruise run. I mean, just look at that. And then there's this extraordinary sequence inside the CIA. I mean, this visual still resonates with us to this very day. The silence, the tension, it's just freaking beautiful to experience. And I do laugh hearing Paula Wagner in the behind the scenes talking about how dangerous they are, etc., when we all now know where both he and Mission Impossible would go in the coming decades.
But that was a really difficult stunt, and if you drop him too far down, that's not good, because he was coming fast down. If you drop him too high up, it's not as dangerous. So finding the perfect blend there is challenging, and that, I think, is one of the hardest stunts that Tom's done.
And the film finishes up with a sequence atop the Eurostar, and it achieves perhaps the greatest sense of speed that I've ever had in an action movie. And throughout this journey, we have a really outstanding lineup of characters and actors, including Luther, who is portrayed by Ving Rhames, and Eugene Kittredge, portrayed by Henry Czerny, and both of whom are present in The Final Reckoning. And along with them, we have the interesting and very strange man John Voight as Ethan's team leader. The great Jean Reno is here as Krieger, and we have Emmanuelle Béard as Claire. The legendary Vanessa Redgrave also made a very welcome appearance as Max. There is just something about 90s movies that I cannot get enough of. It is absolutely an age thing for me, being in my mid-30s. But seeing all of those computers and the cutting-edge technology of the day always feels good to me. I love how much of the action is caught in camera, especially when compared to today as well. Of course, Mission Impossible features CGI, but it was well before the age of shots that could be relatively easily caught in camera, now being generated on a computer, and it just feels so good to watch as a result, and I keep coming back time and time again. What a great movie. I still remember when Mission Impossible 2 came out, there having been so much hype around it. Now, there is a lot I respect about MI2. I mean, getting John Woo to direct, having Limp Bizkit perform the main theme, and, the music being kind of heavier. They were all creatively bold decisions, and ultimately it does end up being one of my lesser enjoyed Mission Impossible films, but I can't ever hate on a movie trying something interesting and, like I said, creatively bold. And I'm always a total sucker for John Woo action. And it is also up there as being one of the most visually interesting movies in the series. Now, in terms of the cruise, we have to talk about that beautiful hair. I always find it fascinating to see what they decide to go with for a hair length with each movie. As a follically challenged male, I'm deeply moved by such a magnificent head of hair. Cruise looks amazing in this film and well up to the mission at hand. The brass in MI2 is Anthony Hopkins, who really was a top-tier choice, and he was still red hot at the time. Thandie Newton is Nia Hall, who is Ethan's partner in this one.
Right.
Doug Ray Scott plays IMF agent gone bad, Sean Ambrose. And Doug Ray really is a great actor, and if you can believe it, he almost was cast as Wolverine. And I actually think he would have been quite good as Wolverine, actually, but I'm glad that we got what we got there. His right-hand man, Hugh Stamp, was portrayed by Richard Roxburgh, and Richard is a bit like Xander Berkeley in that he is a really, really good actor that never really got a role that allowed him to show how good he is. Boris the Blade also makes a welcome appearance as Dr. Nikovich as well. Now, the film itself does what it says on the tin. It's a John Woo Mission Impossible movie, for good or bad, and as a result, it really is the odd sheep of the bunch. The martial arts scenes in particular are very Woo. There's a lot of wire work, and there's a lot of style that really is unlike all of the other films, to be honest. And ditto re the photography, as there is a lot of slow motion, a lot of zooms, the lot, and it's always difficult for me to hate on that. The plot itself is somewhat compelling. Nikovich has created this paradigm-shifting kind of antidote, but in order to do that, he had to create the most deadly virus the world had ever seen. Ambrose wants to control both in order to make a load of money, and Ethan wants to destroy the virus in order to stop him. In order to facilitate this, Hunt recruits Nia, who is actually Sean Ambrose's ex, to go undercover with him. There's plenty of awesome action, and the music does a good job of heightening the emotional intensity, and again, it's a very unique musical style for Mission Impossible, although it was only the second movie at the time, so it's important to bear that in mind as well. In general, I'd say that the sequences from the previous movie are more memorable, but goddamn, my palms still get sweaty thinking about that bloomin' rock climbing sequence at the beginning, which is fantastic. And whilst I noted that it is one of the most visually interesting movies in the series, it does suffer from having a lot of flat lighting, meaning that almost all the scenes are lit evenly from all sides and at all depths of the shot, which really reduces the contrast and therefore reducing the dramatic impact of the shot. There are so many emotional moments in this film, as in kind of like artistically dramatic moments that are otherwise visually striking, but end up falling completely flat, for me at least, because of the way the scenes are lit. And as much as I hate to say it, a lot of the film ends up looking more akin to kind of a TV show than a movie, especially when compared to some of the later Mission Impossible entries.
I am the storm.
But even though these flaws exist, I just can't help having a great time with this movie. The slow-mo, the music, the style, it's just freaking awesome. And as weird as the movie is, in hindsight, it's a mission worth accomplishing. Now we're getting to the really good stuff, as Mission Impossible 3 is a phenomenal movie. I don't know whether this is to my credit or my shame, but I actually went to see this film twice at the cinema on the same day. My father surprised me and my brother with tickets to see it in the afternoon, and I had already agreed to go and see it with my mates that evening, so I just went twice. But I have no regrets, as like I said, it is an incredible movie. Now, believe it or not, Mission Impossible 3 was the first movie that J.J. Abrams ever directed, and with a budget of $150 million, but my God, did he do a phenomenal job. Legend has it that Tom Cruise loved his show Alias and asked for a meeting regarding Mission Impossible, and when they met, Tom simply asked, "So, do you want to do it?" Just awesome vibes, and given the film they ended up making, an inspired decision. From the very instant it begins, it's clear that we are already charting dramatic heights beyond what could have ever been imagined with Mission Impossible. Seeing Tom Cruise and the late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman face off in such god-tier dramatic fashion is a treat that I don't think anyone could have expected when walking into the cinema to see this film. The level of disgust, of loathing, of hatred that PSH makes us feel for Owen Davian is manifested so quickly and so effortlessly that I don't think I've ever experienced anything like it. Honestly, I can't say enough about how extraordinary this opening is. It's no exaggeration to say that it is one of the greatest and most impactful openings to a movie that I have ever seen. And it sets the scene for a film of intense drama. And after this legendary opening, the film shoots back in time a short while and once again makes it very, very clear that this is a character-driven, dramatic action movie. Basically, Ethan has retired from the field and is building a life with his fiancée, Julia, portrayed by Michelle Monaghan, before succumbing to the inevitable and going back in to rescue one of his former trainees from an operation gone wrong. Luther is back, along with Maggie Q as Zen. Jonathan Rhys-Meyers joins the fray as Declan. The great Lawrence Fishburne is literally the brass in this movie, and he plays Brussel, or Brassel.
I bullshit you not.
Billy Cudrup plays Musgrave, who seems to be one rung higher than Ethan, but lower down the food chain than Brassel.
It's complicated.
And this is the first movie in which Simon Pegg appears as Benji. Now, as I intimated before, the story in this film is much more personal. It's much more character-driven. And as Ethan is trying to save Lindsay, she intimates that there's something she needs to tell him. But unfortunately, before she can, the mission fails, and Lindsay is killed. Subsequently, Ethan feels he has no choice but to finish the job. Julia can tell that there's something he's not sharing, and this again leads to a beautiful dramatic moment. And I just love how seriously Tom Cruise takes Mission Impossible.
I need you to trust me.
You know, to a lot of people, it is kind of like a pulpy action series, but it's not. It's so much more than that.
Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall.
But after this, Hunt and his team end up capturing Owen Davian. Now, as they're transporting Davian back to the US, I still remember being sat in the cinema during this sequence as they're on the plane and just feeling this bubbling loathing of Owen Davian just growing and growing. And you can just see the tension, the anger in Tom Cruise and Ethan Hunt building and building. And you just feel it. And you just want nothing more than to see Davian just get. But instead, Ethan went about 10 steps further. And I don't know what I expected, but like, this was so exhilarating and so satisfying to watch. And this is storytelling at its greatest, where you're just built up to this state of like feeling a particular emotion that kind of requires something to satiate you, and then the movie just pow gives it to you in like a massive big dollop. And this sequence, man, I mean, just incredible. Davian hears Luther say Ethan's name and can work out who he is, and unfortunately, as we probably were expecting, Davian is broken out from the transport in this epic sequence, which is, again, just really, really fantastic and includes this physics-defying explosion. He kidnaps Julia, uses Julia as leverage to try and compel Ethan to capture something called the Rabbit's Foot. Somehow in all of this, Ethan is framed for something and they're going to bring him in. He breaks out and goes to China to go and find the Rabbit's Foot. So he steals it, takes it to Davian, and we finally catch up to where we were during that incredible prologue sequence, only to discover another double cross. From here, Ethan escapes, and with Benji's help, makes his way to the building that Julia's being kept in. And en route, we are treated to what might be the single greatest Tom Cruise run of all time. Is it the greatest? That is hard to say, because there is another film that just, wow. But this is in my top 2, I think, for sure. In fact, I love this sequence so much that I actually recreated it in my Christmas special a few years ago. And yeah, don't judge me, but what can I say? I love Tom Cruise. And after reaching that building and finding Julia, Davian activates the electrical charge that was planted in his head and proceeds to start beating him up. But it ain't enough. Ethan gets the better of him, and Davian meets a very brutal, quick end. From here, Julia electrocutes Ethan to short out the electrical charge in his head, and then brings him back, and that's that. They both live happily ever after. Kind of. Now, this is a damned fine movie, and easily one of the most impactful and satisfying in the whole series. Love Mission Impossible 3. So, after Brian De Palma's original, John Woo's sequel, and J.J. Abrams' dramatic threequel, Brad Bird was brought on to direct Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And it was yet another awesome, entertaining movie that felt completely different to those that came before it. Having directed Pixar's Ratatouille and The Incredibles, Brad Shaw was a bold and interesting choice to bring on for this, but ultimately, it really did pay off. Tom would later tell Christopher McQuarrie that he felt they really cracked something with this movie, and I think he was right. Although I didn't quite rate Ghost Protocol as high as Mission Impossible 3, it was the first in the series to fully embrace that comedic edge that the other movies had kind of kept at arm's length, and it really does work big time. Benji is brought on as a full member of the team, adding to the creative tools and comedy chops available to the storytelling.
That was not easy, but I did it.
And joining him is Paula Patton as Jane, with Jeremy Renner as Brandt joining later on. Now, as the film begins, Ethan is chilling in a Russian jail before Benji and Jane help him escape so that they can break into the Kremlin to steal a file. The comedic edge of this movie is on full display from the off, and it is brilliant. Simon Pegg is always a treat. And after enjoying some remarkable Mission Impossible technology, they discover this file has already been stolen by the big bad, Kurt Hendricks, played by the late Swedish legend, Michael Nyqvist. He also blows up the Kremlin, but leaves a trail of breadcrumbs that lead straight to the IMF. As a result, the president invokes Ghost Protocol and disavows the entire agency. Now, as this is being explained to Ethan by Secretary Tom Wilkinson, they are ambushed by a Russian strike team and the secretary is actually killed. Now from here, Ethan and the team go dark and pursue Hendricks without support in order to prevent Hendricks from successfully starting a nuclear war. Now this is where the stunts in Mission Impossible started to get pretty ridiculous. I remember watching this at the cinema for the first time and once again having Tom Cruise make my palms get real sweaty. But even sat there, I never in a million years thought that he was actually climbing the building for real. Let me be clear, I felt like he was doing it for real, so the sequence worked on me, but I could not fathom how that could actually have happened. It really was a paradigm shifting moment for me, where I started to realize what Tom Cruise was doing in elevating this medium. Because it's not just the act of performing that stunt on the side of the Burj Dubai, as terrifying and potentially perilous as that is. It's having the weight to kind of strong-arm the studio into making sure he was the one to do it. As this obviously adds an order of magnitude to the financial liability, but also an insane amount of emotion and drama to the sequence itself. But from this point in the film, there are more twists and turns until Hendricks does actually successfully launch a Russian nuclear missile towards the United States. The eventual confrontation between Ethan and Kurt leads to that missile getting aborted and the mission being accomplished.
Mission accomplished!
And we all lived happily ever after. Kind of. Ghost Protocol is a really fun, cool, and exhilarating movie. As I said earlier, I don't think it quite moved me to the extent that Mission Impossible 3 did, but it was still a damned entertaining ride, and it really set the stage for what would follow.
The Syndicate has control of our entire drone fleet.
I was really excited for this film. I had definitely bought into the stunts that were lined up for this movie. I was hyped to see them on the big screen. I was there for them. While ultimately this film had some extremely cool moments, on the whole, I don't really think it came together for me. The highlight was, I cannot deny, that opening sequence where Tom is quite literally hanging off the side of a transport plane. Whilst it did absolutely nothing for the story, it was literally jaw-dropping to watch. It still is. And again, even if you didn't know beforehand, you can just feel that it's really Tom. You can feel the emotional intensity of what is being captured in camera. And just letting that shot roll, and even more crucially, without slathering CGI all over it, it just works. Wow, goddamn. This is what cinema is all about. This is what Tom Cruise is all about. And from here, we go on a fairly haphazard journey as Ethan is framed by the Syndicate, which is, again, an insanely generic name. And he goes dark as he tracks down the organization's leader, Solomon Lane. The CIA actually disbands and absorbs the IMF, and they lead the hunt for Hunt. This is also the film where Rebecca Ferguson joined the fray, and we were introduced to Ilsa Faust, which was, of course, a highlight and would continue to be so. Jeremy Renner, I have to say, is pretty horrifically misused in this film, and I think maybe that's why he didn't return for Fallout. Alec Baldwin is brought on board as Huntley, the CIA man overseeing the hunt. Now, as I hinted at before, I don't really care for Rogue Nation, as controversial as that is. There are some beautiful shots, cool sequences, amazing stunts, but it just combines together to create something that just doesn't hit me right in the gut. It also started a trend which, thankfully, I think has been abandoned for Final Reckoning, where they would use the reality of the stunts and of the Tom Cruise-ness to advertise the film. They basically show us all of the most dramatic stunts in the film, show us how epic they were, that they were being filmed for real. And it did ultimately undermine their dramatic impact when we would watch them in the film, I think. And also, as would become a bigger problem later on, they would go to the trouble of filming something really, really epic, like Cruise speeding along at high speed on a motorcycle, only to paint over the shot with CGI. Now, I'm only speaking for myself, but it really, really undermines the emotional impact of that shot for me, especially when such a big deal had been made of the stunts being real. I don't sit there looking for the CGI. I don't sit there trying to poke holes in it, but I can't help how I react when I watch something on screen. I don't even have to think about it. I just feel it. And yeah, it does undermine the emotional intensity of what I'm experiencing. But that aside, it is a cool and interesting movie, but just not that moving for me. Thus, when I heard that it also signaled the end of the practice of every Mission Impossible film getting a new director, I was quite disheartened. Of all the directors to keep on for a sequel, why keep the one that had directed what was, in my view, probably the least moving film in the series? Well, it was obviously because they knew something I didn't, as they would end up going ahead and making the greatest Mission Impossible of all time, and what could be credibly described as a borderline perfect movie. I don't even know where to begin with this one. Mission Impossible Fallout really is, so far as I'm concerned, knocking on the door of being a perfect movie. Off the muscle, despite Christopher McQuarrie being brought back on to direct, he made a point of noting that every mission film had a distinct visual style, and this is a trend that he wanted to continue with Fallout. Thus, the inspired decision was made to bring on Rob Hardy as director of photography. This decision pays dividends from the very moment the film begins. His use of light and shadow is second to none.
I am the storm.
With so many of the shots having lights in the environment that end up lighting the scene in the most insanely beautiful and dramatic way, and Fallout ends up being, by far in my view, the most visually striking movie in the entire series. And before we talk about anything else, I just had to note how incredible, outstanding the photography is in Fallout. 10 out of 10. And can I just note something? How are we at the 6th film in this series, and it suddenly increases the quality level by this much? What equivalent is there in cinema? It's just extraordinary.
Everybody out!
The basic plot of this one is that the Apostles are a kind of messianic terrorist organization that rose from the ashes of the Syndicate, and they are seeking to acquire plutonium and set off a nuclear bomb in order to create a new era of peace, with Ethan and his team having to stop them. Again, not particularly profound, but more than enough to set up this incredible movie. The opening sequence is Ethan and the team fumbling some plutonium into the hands of the Apostles. And as we get going, the film pairs this extraordinary photography, I mean, just look at this shot, with the best musical score in the entire series coming from Lorne Balfe, including the blatant, shall we say, inspiration from Hans Zimmer, and in particular the prologue of The Dark Knight Rises, which I think we've all noticed. But it just works. In fact, the music is so intense and energetic in a way that I think I've only ever personally felt when the composer is also conducting, interestingly. I mean, think John Williams, think Barry Gray. And during the initial briefing, the great Angela Bassett is here as Erica Sloan, with Alec Baldwin having moved from CIA to becoming Secretary of IMF. And he once again just does this beautiful little moment to just elevate Tom Cruise, elevate Ethan Hunt to this kind of mythological figure, and it's just so awesome. We were also introduced to Henry Cavill as CIA agent August Walker, along with that beautiful mustache, and goddamn did he and Tom get to work. We very quickly see that once again, the level has been raised for the stunts in this movie. Very, very quickly, we get to see this halo jump over Paris, with Tom really jumping out of a plane at an altitude of over 20,000 feet. Now, this sequence does really work for me, but we're already seeing the progression of a problem that would actually fatally undermine an incredible stunt in the next movie. I'm still asking myself why they went to the trouble of filming this incredible jump, including the camera operator that had an IMAX camera glued to his helmet as he leapt out of the plane backwards, creating this new helmet that illuminates Tom's face during the jump so that we can see it's him, only to slather a load of CGI over the top of it. Why? I understand that the story needed the jump to be over Paris, so why not then design a stunt that tells that story without needing to compromise the dramatic impact of the photography with this computer-generated imagery? Of course, I'm just expressing how I feel about it, and it's a great sequence, but I just feel they undermined their own mission. But from here, they get inside this club, we see the beautiful lighting, amazing visuals on display here. Hunt and Walker quickly locate the John Lark decoy, whose identity they're planning to steal, of course, only for us to be treated to this absolutely wonderful fight sequence in the bathroom. The legendary Liang Yang plays the John Lark decoy, and it is an absolute treat to watch him on screen during this fight sequence. And obviously I can't not mention Henry Cavill reloading his biceps. How can you not love that? From here, Ilsa reappears, and Ethan ends up entering the meeting without a disguise, so that he can be introduced to the White Widow, who is the daughter of Max from the first movie, a wonderful throwback. From here, Ethan and the team agree to help her with some business, which ends up being to free Solomon Lane in order to be put in touch with the Apostles. And it's during this sequence to free Lane that we see more incredible stunt action, as Tom Cruise blasts his motorcycle through Paris at high speed with no helmet on. What a maniac. Now there are, of course, again, lots of CG cars on the road during this bit, but it actually doesn't bother me as much here, and I love this sequence. And can we just take a moment, again, look at that, just, oh. They end up smuggling Lane to London, where there is another legendary Mission Impossible double cross that sets up what might be the greatest Tom Cruise running sequence in history. Obviously, I've already mentioned the one in Mission Impossible 3 that cannot be praised enough, but the sequence in Fallout is just pure cinema. It's like they just gave us all of the Tom Cruise running we could ever want, and Rob Hardy's photography is raising the bar once again, and we just get moment after moment, shot after shot after shot. R.I.P. ankle. And if you're a fan of Tom Cruise, this is just like injecting the best drug in the world straight into your veins. It just doesn't get any better than this. Unlimited creatine phosphate. And from here, we're quickly treated to a huge change of scenery as the team makes their way to Kashmir in pursuit of Lane and Walker. Shortly after arriving, there's a wonderful twist when we discover that Lane and Lark engineered this whole thing so that Ethan and Julia would bump into each other there, which is a really incredible moment. And after discovering some of the plutonium, Hunt goes after Walker, and well, I'm really not sure that words could ever do justice to cinema like this. And it is straight up one of the most incredible things I have ever seen. The emotional impact of seeing Tom Cruise doing this, it's just, like I said, it's beyond words. I don't think I will ever get over seeing this moment. And I just have to imagine that Rob Hardy, that Christopher McQuarrie, as they are just sitting back, seeing this get captured in real time, just thinking, God damn, is it ever going to get any better than this? And I get emotional just watching this, and I can't even imagine how they felt, just knowing that they are at the absolute apex, the pinnacle of cinematic storytelling. And Tom Cruise, man, I mean, just, After successfully climbing up, Ethan hijacks the helicopter. And, oh yeah, by the way, Tom Cruise actually pilots it. I really do wish we could have seen some longer, uncut shots of Tom in the cockpit or from the outside of the helicopter, but obviously the logistics of this sequence are already just absolutely ludicrous. So what we get is just amazing. And, I mean, like, Tom Cruise piloting the helicopter during a helicopter chase sequence in Mission Impossible, just like, bruh, wow. But he does do it, and he sets off in pursuit of Walker. Now, whilst this is happening, Ilsa and Benji are taking care of Lane, whilst Luther and Julia are defusing one of the bombs. Now, Hunt's showdown with Walker just keeps going and going and going, and he eventually catches up. They crash, they have a fight, more and more happens, and it's just insanely satisfying. In the end, all comes good. Ethan gets closure with Julia, which I think kind of gives him permission to maybe start something with Ilsa. And that's that. Now, there are some minor criticisms that I could levy against this movie, but today ain't the day for that. For a movie I enjoyed this much, and I continue to enjoy as much as I do, I just want to celebrate the fact that it exists and that I'm lucky enough to be around at the same time as it.
I'm beginning to see why you guys enjoy this so much.
From the way the thing looks to the insane action, the music, the drama, it is peak Tom Cruise, peak Mission Impossible, and the way this movie makes me feel is why I am glad that I'm alive. Now, following on from Fallout was never going to be easy, but Dead Reckoning does a damned fine job. The plot of this one revolves around a Russian submarine called the Sevastopol, which houses a state-of-the-art defense system that the US discovered and injected with a kind of revolutionary AI that becomes sentient and ends up getting the crew of the sub to destroy themselves so that it can be left alone at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean in peace. It's known as the Entity, and it goes on a rampage doing all kinds of bad tech stuff. Now, I do have to note that the production of this film was obliterated by COVID and the lockdowns, and it seemed that every week there was another story of them getting shut down or there being a delay or something. It was just a nightmare. But all the same, they got it done. Now, unfortunately, in my view, Rob Hardy was not brought back to photograph Dead Reckoning, instead being replaced by Fraser Taggart, who did actually do some work on Fallout. And while the film does have some beautiful moments of real cinematic value, to be honest, it just doesn't hit like the one before, for me at least. Lorne Balfe is back for the music, and again, just doesn't quite land in the way that Fallout did. To me, it sounds very much like there was an attempt to create a more emotive score, but what can I say? I don't think the pieces fit together as beautifully as they did in the previous film. In terms of the story, it's basically one of Ethan competing against every government in the world to find a cruciform key that grants access to the Entity. And whereas the governments want to control it, Ethan wants to destroy it. Now, because the Entity has control over all technology, all digital space, it forces them to rely on more kind of analog tech and makes their mission that much more difficult. And as such, Mission Impossible once again takes us all across the world with all kinds of amazing sequences, cool locales. There is a bit of cringe near the beginning where they retcon Ethan's origin story in to add dramatic weight to the introduction of the big bad, Gabriel, as portrayed by Asa Morales, who Ethan now has a kind of history with. Gabriel is basically controlled by the Entity and is its proclaimed messenger, with him being given extraordinary amounts of data and information about the world by the Entity so that he kind of maintains an upper hand over everyone that he interacts with. Along the way, we also meet Grace, portrayed by Hayley Atwell. Her and Ethan have really great chemistry throughout the movie, but I can feel the attempt to give priority boarding to their relationship and kind of hurry it along a bit, presumably because I know Rebecca Ferguson didn't want to return for the final reckoning, and it does feel a little bit like, wow, you're getting very close very quickly here. But I still buy it. Benji and Luther are back again, and interestingly, Henry Czerny is back as Kittredge, who was an awesome addition to this movie. He's aged like a wine. And the White Widow is back. Christopher McQuarrie is also back again, directing. And, like I said, they do end up creating a damned entertaining ride. Although it doesn't reach the lauded heights of Fallout, it's still very, very good. The stunts in this movie are extraordinary, but again, I just have to be honest, and I have to remark on something that I have touched on earlier. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why the production went to the trouble of conceiving and executing this extraordinary stunt, only to paint over most of the shot with CGI. It completely undermines the emotional impact of the moment to the extent that Simon Pegg's iPhone video of the stunt being performed has more dramatic weight than the moment in the movie.
Jesus Christ.
Oh my God!
He was kind of like, well, he was flailing a little bit. Is that all right?
Are you crying, Simon?
A little bit.
You okay?
Despite how epic the stunt itself is, it just doesn't hit like some of the simpler ones of the past that weren't hidden behind all that CGI. But again, to be fair, they did use this moment time and time again to advertise the film. Hence, by the time we watched it, it did feel like it was already done. But even so, it is emblematic of the level that Tom Cruise is playing this game at. WTF. Again, just talking about like how the film made me feel, I did also have some issues with some of the compositing and the use of green screen, which again, it just felt not quite impactful enough. Like I said that before, I want to enjoy the hell out of everything I watch, but when something doesn't feel right, it just doesn't feel right. And as is the case with some of these shots, they just don't feel quite real, quite tangible, you know what I mean? I just can't emotionally engage with them as much as I would like to. And it could well have been out of necessity due to COVID and the lockdowns, like I said, but it is what it is. And it is partially made up for with a truckload of great and varied running sequences that, again, are nothing but pure cinema. And I'm here for it every single time. And honestly, if you just give me this, I'm happy. And the film does culminate with this epic sequence on the train, with Ethan actually managing to acquire the cruciform key from Gabriel, and him learning that the Sevastopol is where he has to go to find the entity, setting it all up for the final reckoning. Not a great movie, but a very good one. And now we're going to shoot forward in time to future Nathaniel, who has just come out of the cinema from watching the final reckoning, and we're going to see what he reckons. Fingers crossed, he liked it.
So, future Nathaniel has just come out from watching Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and what can I say? It was really, really, really good. So, slight change of plan. I did record some thoughts about how I felt coming out of the cinema, but I was so zonked, and I think I was very sleep deprived that day, and I was just so mesmerized by what I'd seen that my initial reactions were just all over the place and would not make for good viewing. But I still wanted to keep it off the cuff, so I decided we're going to come out here into the garden, as it's such a beautiful day, and I'm going to give you my reflections a week later today. So, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning was an awesome film. Did it live up to the lauded heights of Mission Impossible Fallout? Not quite, but it was right up there, and it was incredible cinema. The Final Reckoning, it wasn't an action movie in the traditional sense. Like, a lot of the Mission Impossible movies aren't like straight up action films. There wasn't a huge amount of action in it. It was much more of a slow burn with some breathtaking kind of set pieces within that. But as a result, it is a tense experience, and it is an amazing journey that we're taking on. Now, the story itself is pretty convoluted, if I'm being honest. There is an insane amount of retconning. For example, with the events on the Sevastopol that happened at the beginning of Dead Reckoning, they now happened in 2012. But it was done to make some of the previous events in Mission Impossible fit like more completely into the Final Reckoning, and to make the continuity of the final films kind of leading up to this in a more profound way. So, is it jarring? Yes. Can you tell what's going on? Yes. But I can't hate on it. You know why? Because it was done for me and for you, and for the hardcore kind of Mission Impossible fan that's invested in the series, that's going to notice these little cues and these little throwbacks and stuff to the previous films. And there are moments in this film that literally throw back to the first movie in a pretty amazing way. So how on earth could I hate on that? And in fact, I think there's a chance that the box office take for The Final Reckoning might not actually be that great, and this is one of the reasons, because they made a movie for the Mission Impossible fans, and I was there for it, and I had a phenomenal time. And basically, the reason that they've done this retconning is to make Ethan the center of what has happened until this point and what is happening right now. Like, the situation that the world is in is kind of because of things Ethan had done in the previous Mission Impossible films, which again is a bit jarring because it is very retconny. But the reason why he did these things in the previous films, and the reason why it has led the world to where it is, it does fit with the character of Ethan Hunt. It does logically feel, yeah, the reasons that he did this, the reasons that he's done things he's done in the most recent films, it's consistent. So in that sense, 100% I'm there for it, and I love the fact that The Final Reckoning is a full-blooded Mission Impossible film for the Mission Impossible fan. So the story itself is pretty ridiculous, to be honest. The entity has taken over the world, essentially. All of the technology, cyberspace, you know, all of those things are now controlled by the entity, and as they say, the world is in the entity's reality now. The entity is now taking over the nuclear arsenals of various countries, culminating with an attack on the US arsenal with the goal of launching these arsenals and destroying the Earth. But it can only do this once the entity sealed itself inside the Doomsday Vault in South Africa. Like I say, it's very convoluted, but basically it's a totally adequate place to get this journey rolling, and it ends up being an incredible journey. But I think one of the most important things for me to note about The Final Reckoning is that it alleviates basically every complaint, everything that I might have moaned about when it comes to other Mission Impossible films isn't in this one. The sets themselves, they feel tangible, deep, real. The cinematic quality is off the charts. Tom Cruise's hair is once again the perfect length, and I love the fact they even remark upon that in the film, which is just awesome. And fundamentally, as we will talk about later, they design a stunt in this film that they just photograph and then put in the movie, and it is just spectacular. And the things that happen along the way are so ludicrous and implausible and, you know, just ridiculous that if anybody else was playing Ethan Hunt, it would be very difficult to buy in. But because Ethan Hunt is portrayed by the one, the only Tom Cruise, I am able to suspend my disbelief to a greater degree than I otherwise might, and completely buy in to what I see on screen, and it is sensational. Now, if you buy into the Tom Cruise myth, you know, the legend of the man, the last great American movie star, etc., then this film is going to blow your mind, because there are things that Ethan Hunt's character does in this movie that are quite simply jaw-dropping. They're incredible, and in some instances quite difficult to suspend your disbelief to accept. But again, when you've got buy-in for Tom Cruise, and I'll just put my cards on the table, I even started a Tom Cruise inspired pizza business for a short while. Maybe it will come back one day, I don't know, but I am a total full-blooded believer in the legend of Tom Cruise, and it allows me to have buy-in to these sequences in a way that I just wouldn't be able to if anybody else was performing them. And for example, it means that when we have the sequence where Ethan, spoiler warning by the way, but when Ethan goes down to the Sevastopol to try and retrieve the Port Cova, which is like the source code for the entity that they're going to use, the sequence is, I'm trying to think of the word here. The sequence is mesmerizing. Truly mesmerizing, to the point that, again, I just don't know if I've ever had an experience like it in the theatre. Oh, I can hear a plane up there. That could be Tom Cruise, you never know. After the sequence in the submarine, which again, man, it was amazing. The sound design, the music, the atmosphere, the tension, like, I still think, like, there's a moment, you might have even seen the clip because it's on Twitter and stuff, and you might have seen the movie, but when he's being submerged in this new suit and the rear of the submarine opens up, and what we see there is just like, it is unbelievable. But from here, what he's doing, especially when he's ascending again, it's insane. It is ludicrous, but it's also Tom Cruise. So even though I'm sat there witnessing this insane stuff, I believe it. You know, I am there because I'm just at the edge of my seat, so tense. And that submarine sequence going down to the Sevastopol, it was peak Tom Cruise, or it was until the last part of the film. And when it comes to that final stunt sequence, again, I have never seen anything like it. In order to just give you a sense of how it made me feel, we are quickly going to zoom back to my initial reactions after having just come out of the cinema. The stunt is just so good. Like, it's so perfect. When I was watching it, I was just like, yeah, I might actually start to tear up thinking about it. It was just everything I could ever want in a Tom Cruise stunt. There are two biplanes. There's a bright red one and a bright yellow one. Obviously, you know, again, the harness is painted out and stuff, but other than that, it's just the photography. They designed the stunt, and that's what's in the film. There's no going around painting out the ramp with like CG grass and stone and stuff. It's just like, it's so intense, so visceral. The altitude that they're flying at, where Tom Cruise is like hanging off of the plane with one hand, like, you can't even put it into words. It was incredible. It was everything I could ever want in a Mission Impossible stunt. It was everything that Tom Cruise brings to the world of cinema in its perfect form. And that final sequence on the planes was just like... And like I said, there is literally not one other person that could have done this. There is nobody else on Earth,
not one person that could have performed this sequence and made us feel the way we did in the cinema. And ultimately, that is why whenever a Tom Cruise movie comes out, I am going to be there. It's not all of his movies are great. We all remember The Mummy, absolute garbage. But what you know is that if you go and see a Tom Cruise movie, he will have done everything he can, everything, to ensure that that movie was the maximum it could have been. Okay, and in the case of Mission Impossible, where it is his baby, what we got was just beyond. You know, beyond. It was a spectacular ride. And ultimately, this is why I just enjoyed The Final Reckoning so much, and especially a week thinking about it. I am glad that I took the time to do this rather than just share my initial thoughts, because the more I've thought about it, the more I really do think that it was a spectacular film. It really was the ultimate expression of Tom Cruise in cinema. What he is able to bring to the table, like that plane sequence at the end, what he's able to manifest on screen, and therefore the emotions that he's able to manifest in the audience. There's no one else that can do what he does in cinema. Just don't exist. And when I think back to the iPhone video that Simon Pegg made of Cruise, you know, jumping off of the mountain in Dead Reckoning, you've got these other movie stars there, you know, who have been in loads of movies that we love. If we saw these people in real life, we'd be excited, you know, it would be a big deal. But they are all there looking and staring at Tom Cruise as he literally rides a motorcycle off the side of a mountain. I mean, I've got full buy-in to this myth, this legend. I want to believe it. I want to just like live in this world where I am completely open to having my mind blown by what he achieves in the cinema on screen, you know. So I want to thank you very much for watching. I'm still trying to get the hang of planning out my videos and really understanding how long they're going to take me to make, because it would have been great if I could have had this Mission Impossible video out during the week that The Final Reckoning came out, but I'm learning. But all the same, I had a really great time revisiting all the Mission Impossible movies, watching The Final Reckoning, and sharing my thoughts and feelings with you. So if you enjoy watching the video, please consider clicking like, as it does help me quite a lot, and maybe consider clicking subscribe, because I've got loads of, you know, videos about loads of stuff on the channel, but I'm definitely honing in on the movies, on the video games, you know, especially for people kind of my age, a little bit older, a little bit younger, because I just love telling stories and celebrating awesome, cool stuff that just makes us happy to be here, you know. So yeah, if you fancy seeing some more stuff like that, maybe consider subscribing. But otherwise, I want to thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.